Oh, let's get that off the screen. Wait a minute. Gee, what a thought it had it going 100%, and I had to go put that on. Anyway, welcome once again to Once Upon a Time in Spaghetti Westerns, the podcast, episode 29, here on Facebook and YouTube live simultaneously, as we have been doing since May 9th. May 9th, Tom. Tom Betts, my co-host. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, how was your week? What did you do?
Avoided the fire and was reading books.
And what was the book that you had on your shelf currently?
Oh, the one I'm reading is Mike's.
Oh.
Mike House's Spaghetti Western Journal. Yes, I'm halfway through.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a great idea. And let's introduce our guests, our panel here. We have the astound author of Spaghetti Westerns, 2 volumes, and Spaghetti Western Digest, Mr. Mike House. Hi, Mike.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, nice to see you. Got a little bit of a delay there. That's okay. And on the bottom, we have Mr. Robert Duvall has joined us. I'm kidding you. Noted lecturer, professore, and author of one of the great Spaghetti Western books, Tony Anthony. Tony Anthony.
Tony Anthony Williams, yes.
Yeah, Tony Anthony Williams, that's what I'm calling you today.
Yes, I feel like Eric Porter in this guest spot in the Morecambe and Wise show, because a great honor to be invited to be on this show, which I've been watching ever since it started.
Good.
Well, we're honored to have you and Mike here finally for our second roundtable. Only the high standards here were set earlier this year when we had who did we have? We had Howard
Hughes, Lee Broughton, and Ulrich Bruckner.
Wow, what a lineup.
Yep.
And look at this lineup. Too bad we couldn't get all 5 of you together, but because of sleet, snow, and rain and different other causes of God, we won't be able to do that. But we finally got these 2 gentlemen, esteemed gentlemen, with us today. And let's first say hi to Mike, the one and only Mike House. Mike, what you been up to?
Well, just trying to get this 3rd volume put together, the digest.
Is he on Mike?
Working on that. Please. Yeah, that's it right now, apparently. We're shooting for March 2021 for that.
Oh, okay. And we'll talk more about your great 2 volumes. You have 2 tomes, which is awesome. But one of the guys that we have on our show today is the one and only Tony Williams, author of the first, I think, co-author of one of the first Spaghetti Western books, Italian Western, The Opera of Violence.
Yay.
It's very nice to be on it, and also a tribute to Lawrence Stagg, who coined the title Opera of Violence and wrote the section on the music.
Right, and is that your only? I know you've written other things, theses and published stuff, but is that your only delving into spaghetti westerns?
Well, it is at the moment. I have written on Fistful of Dollars, Senses of Cinema, and I hope to review some of the new collections which are coming out shortly. I've got and I've been catching up on what I've missed over the decades.
Well, that's why we're
thank God for YouTube.
Yeah, well, listen, we're here to catch up with you guys to see what you've been doing.
Thank
you.
What's
that? Of course, Tom has his copy. I've got my PDF.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
That's great. Thank you.
I've got on the short side or long. I can't see unless it's real close or far away. So mine's on my iPad. But anyway, let's start talking about. Well, this is the roundtable of spaghetti westerns and the state of spaghetti westerns today. After I think. Its first film was what would you say, Tom? 60, 61, 62, maybe a Spanish-American co-production?
Yeah, they go from anywhere from Sheriff of Fractured Jaw to...
Sheriff of Fractured Jaw.
Yeah, we covered that one. That's probably the first British, but it was made in Spain, so we consider it a spaghetti western. And then Gunfighters of Casa Grande was the other one.
Right, Mike, what do you think is the first spaghetti western?
I would have to point to the 2 El Coyote films. Kind of, they had some of the Italian, Spanish kind of sensibilities in them. They were kind of the first ones to really show that they could make Western. I mean, even though they were Westerns, that were kind of, they were, the antagonists were the Americans, which, eventually they would adopt more of that as it went on, the Italian and Spanish. But that's the one I point to, would be the very first one that kind of started that, that showed that it could be done.
Right. And then let me ask you, Tony, what do you think the first legitimate spaghetti Western was that got known?
Yeah, I can only comment on what I've seen so far, but I would say Le Pistole Non Discutono, Bullets Don't Argue, with
Rod Cameron.
That's right, Rod Cameron and Horst Frank. And
right.
Morricone score, Lonesome Billy.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you see these? I was going to ask,
catching up.
Oh, okay. And since when did you see these films? When they came out, or as a student?
Well,
or?
I got them on DVD when I moved to the USA, because I was also able to catch up with a lot of the films which were never released in England, courtesy of our friend Weiser in Video Search of Miami. So I had a copy of The Grand Silence with Dutch subtitles and stuff like that.
There's no better way. If you're going to watch it, you have the Dutch subtitles. I like the Russian ones because that completely kills 1/3 of the screen. But anyway, Tom, we were talking about, what was the first you saw? Was it the first Leone film in the theater?
Yeah, I saw Fistful of Dollars at the theater when it first came out, because we kept hearing the radio commercials of, this is the first motion picture of its kind, it won't be the last. And I'm going, an Italian Western, it's like what Eli says, that's like a Hawaiian pizza. I went to see it to laugh because I knew who Clint Eastwood was from Rawhide, but I couldn't believe that they were going to make a Western. So when I went and saw it, and I counted, because I loved the movie so much, when we got done, I counted the audience. There were 12 people on a Wednesday night, because that's when film started back in the 60s. And when I first saw it, I mean, this is fantastic. What a great film. I mean, it blew me away, because first of all, when I saw the sets, I said, oh, this is a Mexican Western. This isn't made in Spain. These are Mexican adobe huts. This is a joke. And then I think what caught my eye, first of all, was when he walked down the street and said, get 3 coffins ready. And then when he came back, it was my mistake, 4 coffins.
Yeah.
Just that black, dry humor blew me away. I said, this is different. This is completely different than anything I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. It set the standard. And introduced myself, Jay Jennings, Spaghetti Westerns collector for 40 years, film, posters. My wife has already divorced me 3 times because, who are you choosing, the posters or me? And I go, honey, I'll get back to you. But anyway, the first time I saw Spaghetti Western, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, I think Channel 13 out here in Los Angeles, KCOP, might have been 1960, 70 or 71, or I don't know. Either that or I'm confusing it, and I actually saw it on the ABC Movie of the Week. So the memory goes in between, because I was addicted to late night television when the adults were up and they'd show a movie tonight on the ABC Movie. Tom, you remember those days with the graphics and very cool orchestral music out here in the States. And I think it kept running until maybe 10 years ago. CBS Movie of the Week, NBC Movie for a Saturday evening, you name it, that's what it was. And that's what I watched. So I saw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And of course, anyway. And that set this.
The other thing we saw was they used to have a series on Channel 9 called $1 Million Movie.
Dun, 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 dun.
They'd show the same movie like 4 nights in a row. And it was funny because in those days, we couldn't get DVDs. We did have them. Couldn't get video. And I wanted to get a copy of Fistful of Dollars, or for a few dollars more. So all I could do is record it on a tape recorder, just the sound and the music, because I loved it so much. But every night, they would have a different version of it where the commercials would go in. And it was
Tom,
around all the time.
That's what we did. Mike, I'm sure you might have done this too, growing up as a kid. Oh, yeah. Before VHS, you got out the old tape recorder. Tony knows that too. And I did that a lot. And reel to reel sometimes. I just put the microphone next to. I did all that. Yep. So I had lots of tapes that all lost or burned, like the like the sled in Citizen Kane. But anyway, so we're going to do something also special today with all our fans here in attendance, the usual suspects. We've been on the air, I think, almost, 7 or 8 months, Tom? Something like that?
May, June,
May 9th
July,
was our
August,
first
September, October,
podcast.
November. So 7 months going into
Right.
our 8th.
1,200 followers. We call them SWDs, Spaghetti Western Deadheads. You know, they follow us like they follow the Grateful Dead. But anyway, we have I'm going to say, if you have a question for one of our esteemed authors tonight or today, wherever you may be, and from Mike or about his book or about opera violence, feel free, because we'll ask some questions in the meantime. My first question, I guess, we'll go Mike. You've put out 2 volumes of a digest, 2 volumes of a book. I look at it as 4 books. So to me, you've written 4 books, or I know you don't like to use the word author, but you are, sir, an author. But I'm an author too. I'll take credit what credit is due. But what you've done, I think, is taken modern day spaghetti Western writing and made it easy and comprehensible for the fan to go, oh yeah, I remember that. Your writing isn't pretentious. You're writing it from a fan point of view, and I just thank you for your work.
No, thank you. You know, it's something that, if you love something, which I do, you kind of pour your heart and soul into this, and I've been doing it for 40 years. Not the writing part, but the viewing, the collecting. Just like you, Jay, I've been a collector of posters and memorabilia for years. But I take it as, what I want to read. What I like to read is, I want to read just, bits and pieces of things, but I kind of want to congeal together. And I kind of think that with the digest, you get that. You get different views, different opinions, but everybody, but you also get some opinions that you may not like, but you do like. There's some great writers involved in the digest. And I think that to me is really what I'm most proud of, is the digest, just because of all the kind of writers you can bring together. There's some great writers.
When someone like yourself can collaborate and ask different people like a Tom Betts and the other great esteemed writers to join in, kind of like those French or European, they had those critique books, remember, back in the 60s, or Cashiers de Cinema. Mm-hmm. And you gather the best writers to give their take on it. Critical essays, perhaps, but not in the sense of talking down to someone. It's from a real fan point of view. And then we'll just move that over to Tony as well. He said, "Don't call me Anthony, or I'm walking off the set."
Yeah, like Conway said, "Don't call me sir" to 2 screenwriters.
Right. My name is Tony. Right. Okay.
And Kingsley's is different, of course, and he's known as Surbiton, slang on the little posh district sent up in the Monty Python episode in 1971. Okay.
I'm a big fan of Python, so always feel free to name drop. Also, Faulty Towers as well.
The 1948 show. That is pre-Python, and they've got the surviving episodes on 2 discs on the DVD collection. I very much recommend that one.
Very cool. So let me ask you. Okay. About opera violence at the time, really not much written. If anything, Tom,
Nothing,
0.
nothing.
And was it 75, if I'm not mistaken, or summer of 74?
Came out.
Yeah. And you spent a year putting it, or at least years putting it together.
Yeah.
Did you look at it as you giving a lecture, talking to students, or just informing people of what you possibly haven't seen? No written. It's 1975, and there's nothing to see or read, and then your book suddenly comes out. Was it a hit, or did you not know it, or not?
Well, Lawrence was easily contactable, other than myself, because I was in the USA in '84, as well as there was an Australian female, Miss Slade of White Gum Valley, who used to write to me quite a lot. But basically, in 1967, when I was in Manchester for my first term, I went to Studio One on Oxford Road, which is now a dance studio, and saw for a few dollars more. And that really got me hooked. in terms of the visuals, the music, and the different type of Western it represented, as opposed to the declining American model. So then I went to see as many of them as possible, and you have to remember, this was in the pre-VHS, pre-DVD days, and getting really hooked on the genre. And a couple of years later, I met Lawrence, who was into the soundtracks, and we both resided at different times in 330 Great Western Street, Russia, Manchester. They should put a plaque, because they got a plaque to emblem in other places, because it's the same painting on the door, the same curtains when we used to live there. So Lawrence had contacts in London, and then he said, are you interested in collaborating with me on this book? So we went down, signed the contract, and got it out via Lorimer. But at the time, everybody was dismissing these films. Alex Cox talks about this in his book on the Italian Western, and they were being very unjustly slammed. And we just wanted to show how unique these films were, how important the music were, at the time when relatively few were released in England. Of course, you had a number of cinemas. You could catch something in London, and of course, you'd go down to find a cinema in Manchester and get lost when you were trying to see A Dollar in the Teeth. And then you take the train to Rochdale or Oldham, with Companeros was released well before it came to Manchester. You thought, it's not going to get a Manchester release. And it did 2 weeks later, but I stood twice. So it's just a matter of seeing these films, tracking them down whenever possible in the days which were pre-VHS. And we wrote the book from the perspective of two fans who were really interested in the field, not for the academic market, but to basically show our love and respect for this particular genre, which was being unjustly slammed by the critical establishment of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, and we'll get back to...
Let me ask a question. How did you find out where these films were? Were they in the newspapers?
They would be in the newspapers. So you'd have to get down very quickly before they'd go away. Yeah. Now, I saw Once Upon a Time in the West in Wythenshawe. That was a district notorious for skinheads. Although the skinheads are gone now, and I went in daylight, you could go tram to the airport and see some very rough characters still. And of course, the big gun down was shown in the cinema outside Swansea in Forest Park. It doesn't seem it doesn't exist any longer. And you saw this film, which had been cut very badly, and the scene of Cuchillo running through the cornfield was pursued by the vicious establishment. They'd actually cut segments of the Morricone score, and they'd actually butchered it. So at least better seeing that than hoping that there would be a time in the future that they would restore the original version as they've done now. So it was just a matter of chance that you'd catch a film. And in London, I and Lionel Woodman, who was in law and decided to basically drop law, specialised in collecting Italian soundtracks, missed the film, gone off, and they put Buster and Billy on with Jan Michael Vincent. So we spent the afternoon just talking about our love for the genre. So it was very much hit and miss in those days.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's good to know that they were slammed in England like they were slammed here in the United States, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
John Ford done this. And Philip French really poured into Lawrence's description of a Morricone soundtrack in his awful monograph, Westerns. And he was citing in Lawrence's text the same element that people were noticing in terms of Morricone's connection with the avant-garde music group in which he was a part of. And they were just totally oblivious to the novel things which were going on, both in the genre and in the musical soundtrack.
Right. Well, okay. Hold on, Tom.
Real quick, Jay. Since Lawrence was the collector of the music, the scores, did he have copies of LPs that you did not know the film?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Put me on to his
Same
dealer
here.
on Giovanni in Italy, and I've got several of those LP soundtracks today. In fact, I got one Spanish one I want to say at the end.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
No, I want to talk about Mike. Mike, I love the covers for your books and the
Right.
digest. Fantastic throwbacks. The Stefan one, of course. And you even gave a shout out to the podcast, which I appreciated in one of
I love
your.
it.
There it is. And let
Designed
me
by
ask you. Go ahead.
the covers were designed by Tim Paxson, who is of Monster magazine fame. And he also Wings Shop, 2 magazines which I've contributed to in the past. They're horror related, but he designs the covers. I did the designing on the inside. On the insides, when I first did the 2 spaghetti westerns, I did those with Word, which I found very difficult to do. I had a lot of problems, a lot of issues. The next ones I went to InDesign with the digest and tried to get a little bit more professional look to them, and I think I achieved that. The second one I tried to cram. People kept sending me stuff, volunteering. Tom's friend from Australia, Anthony Thorne, came up with some great stuff on the early part of the early times of the genre. And he sent some stuff to me. So it was just stuff people kept sending things and saying, can you use this? And they were all fantastic writers. And
right.
So it kind of just took off on itself.
No, I was going to ask you this. As opposed to Tony and Tom, who had to go by federal, by stagecoach, there was nothing for them for their research. But you, my friend, we, similar age, we have the VHSs and we were born a little bit later to have the DVDs and the Blu-rays. So you had these films that you were writing about at your disposal.
Correct. Yeah. Years ago, a friend of Tom and mine, Carl Black, he came, he really, he very nicely donated a ton of movies to me, which, to that time I had seen so many of them. But, there was a lot of the obscure ones that I was missing. And then he sent me a whole couple, actually 2 FedEx boxes full. This was years ago. And from there, I just, and that finally kind of got me to the point where I've seen almost all of them. I can't say all, but most. I try to avoid the comedies.
That you and I have that in common. A genius, 2 idiots, and a moron, or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
all the Franco and Ciccio movies.
Patience has a limit, but Tom Betts doesn't. Yeah, those are the worst.
Tony, were those shown in England? Any of the Franco and Ciccio stuff?
I don't think films were, but not those.
We don't mention Franco and Ciccio on this show, Tom. You're so funny.
I just want to tell Mike.
2 can of beans and a karate kicker.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to tell Mike, I know he gets frustrated in putting out these editions, and every time he gets done with one, he says, I'm going to go another direction. But
he keeps pulling you back.
You can't. 5 years from now, no one's going to be interested in this stuff.
We'll be at volume 7 of the digest.
Yeah, you're right. I know.
5 to 10 years from now, Tony and I will be gone. And I mean, the interest
and me.
will go down. Yeah. Well, so you got to do it now while there's still an audience out there, and you still have the interest to do it.
And that's why I wrote the book, because I thought, I contributed to years to magazines online. I thought, you know what, you're getting old. Better do it now. and Jay, I did pass it through Tom first. I heard that on an earlier show where you said anybody that's going to write a book, start a blog, it has to go through Tom. It went through Tom. And I'm sure
I speak the truth.
I am sure Tom got sick of me. Tom, I'm going to do this. Tom, I'm going to do that. Tom, I'm going to do that. And it never happened, but finally it happened. It just took a while.
Oh yeah,
Tom's the ultimate proofreader. He says he's going to start charging.
Well, I'm not going to brag, but I mean, since like you, Jay, we've been around so long that we've got connections. Mike asked me the other day what the Turkish scene was in the Cowboy Kid. Yeah, it was an Italian-Turkish co-production. Part of it was filmed in Rome, and part of it was filmed in Turkey. Well, I know Cenk Karel, and Cenk Karel is the guy who interviewed Mickey Knox about Once Upon a Time in the West in the dialogue. So I sent a message through Facebook to Cenk and Shank gets back to me in a day or so, and we got an answer. So, I mean, we've got avenues. Same with Tony. I would ask him about this or that or whatever, and we've got enough connections. We can get an answer for you. It might not be the complete answer you want, but it's enough that you're satisfied. Yep.
Right. And Mike, I was going to go back to you for a second. Like yourself, I am embroiled or embroiled in multiple genres: horror, film noir, Japanese monster movies, Voyage into Space, one of my favorite childhood films of all time. Mike, Giant Robot, Johnny Sacco. This is what I grew up on, and a little bit of Ultraman. But basically, I have my fingers in other genres as well. And growing up, we're kind of like a monster kid, but we're also a spaghetti western kid as well, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, I love all westerns. I mean, I know some people they frown on some of the early B westerns, but
Roy Rogers and
I mean, maybe some silent films I can't watch, but the majority
Randolph
especially
Scott.
Oh yeah, the B westerns. That's my real fascination. Is the B westerns?
It makes Tom. I think Tom is the same. Yeah.
Yeah, because Tony and I grew up on that when we were young. That's what they showed on TV was Bob Steele and the older, Hoot Gibson and stuff like that, because it was 20 years old, and to us, a 20-year-old film was ancient. It was one step above a silent film, but that's what they had for the show on TV. So we grew up with those guys, and I think that's why Tony and I, when we first saw Fistful of Dollars or the Leones, were blown away, because the worst that would happen to a bad guy in his Bob Steele movie was he'd get knocked off a horse from Bob Steele riding next to him and jumping on him, rolling down a hill and getting hit 2 or 3 times in the mouth and carted off to jail. And we're going. He burned down the rancher's house. He stole his cattle and his horses, and he almost raped his daughter. And this is all he gets. And when we saw Fistful and the spaghetti westerns, they got what they deserved at the end.
We never had
right. Well, I started off watching Gene Autry. I grew up in Los Angeles. For our international viewers, we had very cool local television. We had 4 channels, but 90% of it was movies or old westerns, because Gene Autry owned, half of television back in the day. And so we'd get Gene Autry and the Roy Rogers in the morning, followed by a John Wayne movie. And I don't know if you had that. We had it here. It was at 6 a.m. Roy Rogers, 6:30 was Gene, and then an early 1-hour John Wayne Western. So that's the first Western that I ever saw. John Wayne had that big hat that went on for miles, like a wizard's hat. And I would get behind a chair with a belt strap. And when you made that, the horse would make that perfect 4-legged, right, Wile E. Coyote, right, Roadrunner sound. And I would be like this. And my mom's like, okay, as Tom said, the Fruit Loops are ready. So, and who are you talking to, about the cereal or me, Mom? But anyway, I was going to ask you, Tony, what is your earliest recollections of watching spaghetti westerns?
Well, I can go back a little bit further in terms of what you've been talking about, TV westerns, although because we had 2 channels, you didn't show too much of this bad American stuff. It's bad for the British culture, etc., etc. But in the 1950s, I used to see these Republic Studio films with John Payne, Payne, which Passage West and Santa Fe Trail with Rod Cameron. Yep. And there would be this Buccaneer movie called Caribbean. I don't know if you ever saw this, because at the end, basically, Cedric Hardwicke takes his revenge on Francis L. Sullivan, who's stolen his daughter, and Arlene Dahl picks up the musket and shoots him, and Cedric Hardwicke dies in the arms of John Payne and says, "Whatever you do, do not tell her that she's killed her own father." Oh. Dreams are made of. But to go back to the Italian Western, it was just a matter of seeing what was on, going to these cinemas and catching them before they disappeared, because they would never show them on UK television at all. They were just regarded as nasty, violent, in bad taste, etc., etc. And Ford Hawks and the rest were the model. But as Frayling pointed out, I met him at University of Exeter Symposium on Mexican Cinema, and his presentation pointed out that the Italian Western gave a rejuvenation to the classical model, because you had a film like Fire Creek with James Stewart and Henry Fonda, who both looked as if they were in their 80s, and it was a Italian Western. And of course, basically, there would be a lot of important things going on in these Italian Westerns, but people dismissed. And even now, when you have access to, let us say, YouTube, and Requiem for a Gringo, and one of the writers in Sebastian's excellent database, and we do owe a lot to Sebastian in terms of what he's done, pointed out the influence of Kobayashi's Harakiri. And interestingly enough, Stephen Prince, who's done the audio commentary on the soon-to-be-released Django, has written a book on Kobayashi. And I pointed this out to him, and I supplied some links. So there's some very interesting things going on in the editing style, in the camera movement, and let's say 2/3 of the way through a Dean Reed film, which was very much based on his Defa Westerns, you tend to give up. And then there's something new which occurs, which makes it really interesting to show that these people, even on these minor Westerns, were trying to do something very interesting, because the use of Kobayashi's Harakiri in Requiem for a Gringo is completely different from the way in which Kobayashi used it. But the director decided to bring it in to add a really interesting flashback association towards the end of that film.
Wow. Mike, I was going to ask you some of the films that you enjoy in spaghetti westerns. I was reading, I think Death Played the Flute is one of your favorites.
That is correct.
Well, what is it about that film you like?
You know, I'm kind of fascinated with the later 60s, early 70s, when a lot of the direction was kind of shifted back from Spain to Italy. And I kind of like those films where, you know, they begin to mix a little bit of sex, a little bit of, you know, a lot more violence, and some horror tones into them. And I think Death Played a Flute, you know, it steals from, and borrows. It borrows from, it borrows from Death Rides a Horse, Cemetery Without Crosses, and there's even a bean eating scene in it, which they lifted from Trinity. It's an ultra violent film. The first
a little bit like
Trinity,
Cutthroats. A little bit like Cutthroats 9.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, it's essentially that progression to more violent films, and you know, I'm really kind of interested in where the genre was at, you know, 70, 71 onwards, you know, minus the comedies, of course.
Right. Well, we share that.
Yeah, that you know, to me, it's I like you know, kind of makes me wonder where the genre would have went. You know, I know it was heading towards the end regardless, but you know, if some of these directors would have, you know, pumped some, you know, if you did a little more straightforward instead of horror, or not horror, comedy. But I also know where it was kind of at. It, essentially, after '69, it was dead if Trinity wouldn't have came along. So.
Well, let me just say, you're right, practically, but I actually give it in my book, I give it till 75. I know that's way late, but I love even those gritty, I'm not talking about the end of Lee Van Cleef's career with films that shall be renamed nameless, but the gritty ones that came out that they were like the Wild Bunch.
Man Called Blade with the hatchet scene. He cuts his hand off with the hatchet. And
right,
Silver Saddle,
even Keoma,
California, Keoma. Those were all great. And they came at the end of the era. Yep.
I'm going to announce here on the show.
I look at it like, you know, would they go from 68, 69, where they were, no, 67, 68, I believe, where they were doing 70 plus a year, down into the 30 range. And it was into the early 70s or 70 when Trinity came out, it boosted up. 70 was, but it was in such dire straits by 69 that, the genre was going to end regardless. I mean, it had reached its point. So, but yeah, we did get a few here and there, but it was no longer functioning like it once did, which I guess you couldn't really say they could anyways, because it couldn't have continued on the way it was going.
Yeah, kind of like the Beatles.
What they were doing. Right.
right, exactly. Anyway, doing an analogy there. No, I believe Tom and I share this. That was it the Spaniards or Mexicans who should have picked it up, Tom, and made spaghetti westerns?
I always thought that the Mexicans should have picked it up because they had the buildings look like the ones in Spain. So the atmosphere, they had cactus. The whole landscape looked like what they were trying to copy in Spain. So they had that. They had access to the American actors who were hundreds of miles away instead of thousands of miles away. And they had an active industry down there. And they had made Westerns back from the 40s and the 50s themselves. So why they didn't pick it up and carry it on, I don't know.
Right. No, I actually thought about that myself. It might have continued on a little bit longer, but still came to a dead halt. So let me ask you, Tony.
Yeah.
Since your book has come out, some other great books like Mike's have come out. Do you think that it's a good thing to keep it alive? I know it's a kind of a silly question, but because sometimes it can become oversaturated with stuff by people who are just visiting. There's a couple Amazon books that by a guy who's a fan, or he's a cartoonist in his spare time, but he's written a spaghetti western book. Who should write it, and should anybody write a spaghetti western book?
No, I'm not prohibitive against people writing. I've yet to read Michael's books when he can send it to me via check, but I've started catching up on books I've missed. I've read Alex Cox. The 2 or 3 books arrived for me via interlibrary loans, one on the political Western. And I think the more material which comes out, the better. It helps people to look at these films. And let's say, even Visor was significant in this time. I know that Eric Macy, if he's watching that, probably throw a fit. But the fact is, with Visor, he listed films. He may not have seen them. He may have described it accurately, but it's like Christopher Columbus on the voyage. Like, this is India. No, it's not India. It's something else. So when you read something in Visor and the thing was around, you could go on and look at it and do a better type of cartography than what Columbus and Tom Visor had done. So I think that anything significant that comes out, which continues the attention to this genre, is to be encouraged. And I've always been against territorial imperative.
Oh, yes, that's a word we use here a lot. Tom uses it almost every show.
But I agree, because, again, when Tony wrote his book and I was doing the fanzine, like you said, Jay, it was Stagecoach and Pony Express. I mean, what Mike's got at his hands to go on the internet and contact people and get answers. He could write an article in a day if he wanted to. The only constraint that he would have would be thinking of something at 6 o'clock at night and try and get a hold of a Spaniard or an Italian. It's in the middle of the night over there. He'd have to wait till the next morning. But the access to the internet gives him all kinds of information that Tony and I never had. We just dreamed that. We would see
you're the early generation.
We would see a guy's name and not know anything about him, and we still don't know anything about him because nothing has ever come down on it.
Before electric oil lamps, Tom, I get it. I know.
That's it. Fireflies.
That's cool. Mike, let's talk for a second. We'll get back to your Spaghetti Western Digest and book, and we're going to show it in nice full color near the end of the show. You're also you write about other things as well. You write for some other magazines, and you've written some articles and stuff. So you keep alive other genres as well, not just spaghetti western. You still promote the great legacy of other genres as well. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I did write for, like I said, Monster, Wing Shop, all kinds of magazines, all kind of online sites. But these probably the last year, I've put all my eggs into one basket, and I essentially just write about Italian West. That's
Right.
what what my love honestly is. I do like horror films, especially what we talked about, Japanese. And then I do like a lot of the Hong Kong films and stuff like that, the karate films, kung fu films. But anymore,
But at the
it's
end of
all
the
my
day,
eggs.
Mike House dedicates his time to Westerns all'Italiana.
That's correct. That's all. That's
Okay.
all. That's where I am 100% now.
Good. Absolutely cool. Myself, it was growing up, I had a debate. It was either Universal horror classics from the 30s and 40s, and I have them all in the highest quality you can imagine. So I want to be right there with Supernatural, perhaps, Baloney, perhaps not. So anyway, little quick.
How about Hammer?
Yeah, well, Hammer too, but I like the music and the Dracula films with Christopher Lee. But growing up, I had a debate: which one do I choose? Let me get the middle here. Which one do I choose? Spaghetti westerns, or do I go with Universal horror classics, which I probably know as much as spaghetti westerns? Out here at Channel 5, KTLA would show movies till dawn. They'd show 10 Universal horror classics once a night, movies till dawn, Frankenstein, followed by Dracula, Wolfman, Invisible Man, one after another. And you watch this every night. So it was tough to compete at that time. I didn't see spaghetti westerns till later. So remember, I had Roy Rogers to go on at 6 in the morning. So I was leaning toward horror. But of course, when you get in, this is what actually happened. We have Beverly Hills Public Library, where I went to school at the high school. My mom said, get a job or, you could live in the car. So I said, okay. So I found a job at the library. What was the dream job, Tom? Did I ever tell you?
No.
I ran the 16 millimeter after school film projection club or whatever.
Okay.
It was my duty to wind the film 16 millimeter I was familiar with from school. Still, they had some guys show me how to do it, and I ended up showing him how to do it. But I'd go to the front of the library. Oh, Citizen Kane today. And this film and that film. So
you're a projectionist.
I was the projectionist, but I got to sit there and in the back and enjoy the film. But it wasn't where the projection room where Tim Ferrante ran. We're talking a little multi-purpose room with 20 chairs, and I'm in the back, with a half a desk, and I'm winding. Real tools coming up. So that's where I started to see all these great films on my end, as well as on Channel 5. So
well,
Mike, let's talk. Yeah, go ahead,
let me interject this. And Mike House, what is that site that you've access to on all the newspapers?
Newspapers.com.
Okay. Mike and I have talked about this, about Westerns on TV. And he has sent me bizarre stuff from Spain and Italy that was shown on Birmingham, Alabama TV at 11 o'clock at night, or Cincinnati, Ohio, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they were like the same year that they were released in the theaters or the next year. And Jay, if you and I or Tony had seen these titles, we said, oh, that's a Mexican Western. I don't know what it is. And we wouldn't have watched it. But I mean, they were available on US TV. And I'm just blown away when he sends me this stuff, that they were out there. I think that's why we get these video copies back in the day from these towns that, like you said, Jay, show them midnight movies, and they would show Minnesota Clay or some Spanish Western that we would not even watch, but there it is, and they saw it.
Right. Well, I used to go ahead, Mike.
Yes, and some of the really obscure ones too. I mean, Pirates of the Mississippi, Son of Jesse James, stuff that you can't find now. That it actually appeared here on US TV just kind of blows my mind. I said me and Tom send stuff back and forth all the time. I know he's got a friend named Michael Ferguson who sends him a lot of stuff too. And there's just a lot of stuff out there which I didn't know, especially U.S. wise. I thought like everybody else, well, they didn't show them here, they didn't play in the theaters here, but there's a lot of stuff that snuck under our radar. So we
Exactly.
discovered something new.
No, I think it's mostly in Europe. Because I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. When it comes to ephemera or posters or films, I actually think the well is drying up, which I've mentioned on a few shows. As far as memorabilia is concerned, maybe the information is out there, which is fantastic. But I'm just saying, I'm talking about something completely different than you were. But that's why the last 20 years, instead of making that down payment on that SUV, I'd buy 100 posters from an Italian dealer who's dying, and if I don't get it, somebody else will. So Giuseppe said, take it the post. There's a J. And I did. And so, yeah, the well is drying up. I occasionally look at the auction house that begins with an E. I don't mention it here. And it's drying up. That well is drying up. There's another guy named Benito, got a great collection. Unfortunately, his prices are like a New York auction house right off the bat. For a little insert or a picture or card of a fourth-rate player, he wants $300. So, but he has the best stuff. And if you're diehard and you check the age calendar, I'm going to go get it. So, but anyway, let me ask you, Tony, do you collect anything or is that beyond you?
No, I don't collect anything anymore. I never did so, though I do have some posters, and I want to donate one to you, assuming it's not falling apart. It's a fistful of dollars from France with Bob Robertson and Dan Savio in the credits. But
I'll take it.
That's fine, as long as it's not falling apart. But I think that basically I would have some on VHS, the remainder on DVD, but I wasn't all that much of a big collector because I was moving into different fields after Italian Western opera violence, and now I've returned to it in view of the fact there's a lot of material accessible on YouTube I've never seen. And I'm interested in exploring that and catching up on what I've missed in the past.
And the prints are very good now, where they used to be terrible.
Yeah.
Yes, they're like 4K now.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so I'm going to ask you, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one film I think I've seen, I can't remember if it's a Dean film or not, but there's a gunfight and there's a body hanging of a bad man. And then the bad man speaks to the hero to say, go out there, they killed your brother, you killed mine, but go ahead and be a hero. And I don't know if I hallucinated it through too many Miles Dean films or whether it's actually there. Perhaps some of our posters can supply the answer to that.
Let me ask you then, I'll post this to the Authors Roundtable. So is Fidani a legitimate director, or is he the Ed Wood of directing? I think he's legitimate. I actually enjoy his work. He's very artsy. He could probably do less of the showing earlier films in his films, but that's what he's known for. So on his grave, he showed films from his earlier films in his films. But I liked it.
Well,
he had the cool zoom, very Argento-like in the camera work. I know that's a stretch maybe, but I don't think he gets just due. So each one of you can comment on Miles Dean.
Probably. He's seen more than I have.
Well, I think if you look at him at the beginning, his first two films, and Now Make Your Peace with God, and the Stranger Who Kneels Beside the Cross, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
I mean, he had linear narratives. Yeah, linear narratives. They were properly set together, or put together. They went, they started with the traditional beginning, and went to the the finale. Everything was proper, linear. Once he got into the cut and paste years, which was I think it was his third film, and if I'm not mistaken, on his second film, there was some money issues where maybe a producer or a cohort ran off with the money, or was holding the money back, and he had to come up with something quick, which was the Sartana movie with Jeff Cameron, And I think that may be the movie where he actually had to phone in some favors, get some actors to work for him for free, and so he could get back on his feet again. But I think after that, it was all the cut and paste. And I think he became a cut and paste director, essentially. I mean, if you look at his films, a lot of them don't even have proper beginnings. They're just, I remember the first time I'd ever seen one of it, maybe A Barrel Full of Dollars or one of them. But, you know, it starts out, there's not even a proper beginning. It just starts. The film just begins. There they are. There's a scene. Okay, where's my... But I think that but they're highly entertaining films. Now, you know, I mean, if you ever seen the Jeff Cameron one, the Four Came to Kill Sartana, you know, it starts out, Jeff Cameron shot off of a horse. So he starts walking with the saddle. And then all of a sudden, here he goes, starts cutting all his first film into it like crazy. And I'm like, Dean Stratford shows up and he gets shot. There's no story build up. It's just like, what is this?
Yeah.
But I think
those are the moments. Yeah.
You know what? Cut and paste.
But that's what he's known for, is cutting and pasting, like, you know, that we do with articles and photos.
And my biggest complaint is he always shows, like Tony would get on a horse at his ranch, and he would ride to Jay's ranch. Well, they would show every inch of the ride instead of Tony taking off and then arriving. I guess it's like Mike said, it's cut and paste, so he's got to fill time. He's got to get 5 minutes of riding time in here to get that film up to 85 minutes or whatever. But it's that type of stuff that drives you crazy.
Well, I've seen something worse. That film with William Berger playing the priest, and I thought it was done by a young film student with money who cons his way into hiring these actors. And that's
what he wanted, though.
Yeah, but the fact is, the course cart dries off, and you can see manure at the bottom part of the frame. And he pulls on it as if he's probably telling people unconsciously, this is a pile of S. But in one of Dean's films, and this is why I think we should encourage Simone Blondell to catch up on English, or send her a list of questions that she can translate and get somebody to do the answers. There's a Dean film with Gordon Mitchell playing the bad guy. He's looking into the mirror. And then you later see him in the film, bang, 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 like a kid. And this made me think, has Dean read any Jacques Lacan and the mirror phase, the difference between the imaginary and the symbolic? I won't bore you into this, but if it's not conscious, it's accidental. And he's in the type of Italian Western counter-cinema tradition, very similar to Godard and the Giger Vertov group. And I don't think he was conscious of that, but this makes his films perversely interesting.
They do, kind of like Franco, in a way. He's kind of like a mild, not Miles Dean, mild Franco. But anyway, so let's, Mike, let's talk for a second about, get back to your books, your tomes, as we call them. I don't know, did we ask you what made you I know you were a writer and stuff, and you wrote for other mags, but what made you decide that you were going to, and this is self-produced, right? Or you do it with somebody else?
Through Amazon.
Oh, okay.
All the books are through Amazon. And
cool.
I think what it was, I'm an old man. So one day I was like, if you don't write a book now, you're never going to write a book. So it was kind of like, after all these years and me constantly pestering Tom for information, I was finally said, something, I'm going to write a book. So that's essentially what I did. So the first two were, I kind of look at them like Wild West. They're wild, they're kind of, and in the digest, I had other people writing for me. So I had to kind of step up my game because, I wanted to present their work, as best as I possibly could.
Yeah,
so
professionally. Yep.
But yeah. And it's, it was just something that I knew I wanted to do. It was something that I felt I needed to do for myself,
Right. And it's a great book. Now, what is this? Well, I don't know. I'm not giving away. We talk about everything. What is this rubbish nonsense that you were kind of unhappy with it? I think it's great. What is it that you didn't like about that first issue?
I had zero clue what I was doing with self-publishing.
Okay.
Some of the earlier ones, I loaded up a wrong file. I had some issues. I tried to work in Word, and if you work in Word, if you move one thing, it moves everything. So when I finally realized I can't work in Word anymore and moved to InDesign, then that took care of a lot of the problems that I was having with the book.
The only problem with the book, and I hate to even say this, it's nothing to do with Mike. It's like the layout, because he'll turn a page and write 5 sentences, and that's where the page ends. So you've got 3/4 of the page blank, but he can't do anything about it. He didn't have the material to fill in.
It's like making your first movie.
But we don't care. Everything he gave us was great. It was like
you don't even notice it.
It's like Tim Ferrani's.
I'm like the
3/4. Just throw it out there.
I'm like the Miles Dean. I'm the Miles Dean of writing.
There you go.
You are. So tell us about the second issue. What did you want to add or make different than the first one?
I wanted to highlight, out of all the Italian actors, Robert Woods is my favorite by far.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to make sure, when he sent me a lot of information to include in the second issue, I was like, okay, I want to run with that. I want to continue on with the obscure film, but really it was kind of just, my, there you go, Tom Schoen. And it's just my homage to Robert Woods, just a salute to the great Robert Woods.
There's stuff in there that he didn't even tell me.
Right.
Yeah. So holy mackerel, I didn't know that.
So this format, So this format was similar to the first volume.
Yeah, that was Word. That was Microsoft Word. Like I said,
right. But having okay, we'll leave it at that. So, and then you decided to torture yourself and put out a digest. Now, what made you do that?
Well, I had some people approach me, and then I also, when they approached me, I thought, well, you know what, and really, my goal always was to write, another WAI, but I knew I was never going to be.
Whose isn't? Who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, and that was my goal right here.
There's the Bible right there.
So when I started to, you're the best, Tom. So when I started to incorporate and have more people involved in it, it kind of just expanded from there. And I had some great writers in there. Steve Fenton, Professor Van Roberts, Dennis Kapchik. I mean, all kinds of, great writers. And Steve Mason was in the next issue. Eugenio Ercolani was in there, fabulous writer. Javier Ramos was in the first one as an interviewee. So, and then I had Kevin Grant, the second one, as an interview. And just Sergio Martino. So it's just, people started to approach me, so I thought to myself, I'm going to run with this. And it's something I always had wanted to do.
Is this The Man Who Cried Revenge? Or Killer Kid?
That's Killer Kid.
Killer Kid.
Yeah, okay. Killer Kid, yes.
So, no, great books. They are, as I said, they should be a part of any serious Western, spaghetti Western fan or reader. Easy, fun reads. You get to learn about different things. It's not the usual, run-of-the-mill stuff. It's which, there's a few of it. I'm probably, me, I'm the rebel of the show. I kind of have a different opinion about people who should write, who aren't good writers or know what they're talking about, shouldn't write books and shouldn't get up on stage and do stand-up comedy, shouldn't be directors, shouldn't be rock and roll singers, whatever. And I've got a ton of these people in my circle, and I just don't have the heart to tell them. But anyway, but you two gentlemen, it's fantastic for what you've done for the genre. And let's talk for a moment now about the opera violence.
I want to know how you collected the information that you put in the book.
Tom's obsessed with this. How did you get your hands on that info?
Well, I can see on the composers as far as you've got the LPs, which Lawrence did, but I don't know how you got information on them or how you collected information on the films, other than, like you said, you saw them because they weren't on video.
Did you have a time machine? How did you do it?
Well, a time machine is interesting because one of your favorite films, I think, can be viewed in that manner. But basically, it was seeing all the films possible, reading what was written about them at the time, and
Okay.
listing those which had not been released in the UK, and based on the information which was available. And one hoped that one would inspire readers to look at these films, and it was limited at the time. I admit that. I've got a lot of catching up to do, which I'm doing now. But you mentioned Robert Woods. I'd only seen one Robert Woods film in England. That's the first McGregor's film I saw. It's Italian with a pseudonym.
Yep.
And since then, I've been able to see other of his films. And I think Robert really underrates himself as an actor. He is very apprehensive about the melodramatic overtones of Black Jack. But that is so gothic a film, and he's delivering the right type of performance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody whose work I never saw in England was Hunt Power's Jack Betts. So I come to him and I think, who is Jack Betts? Why?
That's Tom's uncle.
Yeah, why are people going on about him? So I start watching Sugar Coat. Amazing. It's a shame that Wild Eats thing is out of print and expensive, because I'd like to listen to the first 40-minute interview where he talks about acting. He begins by Robert Conrad, The Wild Wild West. Then he goes into his version of Buster Keaton, and then he returns to the original in a different type of performance, and his variations are really important. And Jack Bett is an actor in these films who knows how to deliver a performance for the character, and he's really good in these Miles Dean films, which are dismissed. But you look at them, and you look at Jack's performances in those films. He captures the mood of the camera. And in that film, which was the first of the double DVD on Wild Eats, he is the most evil bounty hunter you encounter in an Italian Western. And he deserves what he gets at the end. No redeeming features. And it's really difficult to carry that performance out. And many of these actors have been unjustly marginalized, neglected, or even forgotten in terms of the work that they did in the genre. And now, with the availability of the material, we are now able to see the very good performances they did in often very not professional films, and how they very much exhibited the best traditions of acting in cinema.
Yep, I agree. I think that's why Jack loves Sugar Coat so much, because he's got so many varied characters that he plays in there, from dramatic to comedy, and he really shows his skills in there.
Who does better comedy, Richard Harrison or Jack Betts?
Well, the interesting thing, go back to Jack Betts for a minute. In Sugar Coat, he's running this academy to teach women how to fire, and Mara Krupp is one of those women. And
with a cigar in her mouth.
Yeah, and a couple of nights ago, I was reading the H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard correspondence, and Conan himself says, women never missed the mark, men did. But women were very good shooters who would capture their targets. So you can imagine Mara Krupp graduating and going to kill her husband.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Tom, when did you first get a hold of Tony's book?
I think when we talked with Tim Ferranti, remember, he told me that issue 2 was available at Larry Edmunds in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard. And I went down there and picked up the 2 copies that he had. And I think at that time I saw Tony and Lawrence's book. And of course, as we've said before, if there was anything available, it wasn't in English. And I didn't know diddly squat about Italian Westerns, other than I was in love with them. And when I saw this book, and then I paged through it and saw they had the composers in there, I said, this is great. And the best thing about it, and Tony has said it, they wrote it as a fan. They didn't go into dissertations about political aspects of the films and stuff like that. They wrote it as 2 guys at a theater saying, wow, look at that shot. Look at this. This copied this, or where he got this influence. But it really opened my eyes to what was out there, because as you and I know, Jay, the only ones that we got to see over here were basically the Eastwood films, We didn't know there were 600 spaghetti westerns made.
600, 800 if you count Euro.
Even in those days, by 67, there was probably 200, but we didn't know they
back
were
in the day, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were out there.
If you just take the ones from 62 to 69, you might get into that, but 400 maybe. But then after that, it's just cascaded. The plethora of just, they put them out like rabbits multiplying.
Yep, but that's where I bought it. I know I bought it at Larry Edmunds. I don't know if it was that same day, but within, a short period of time, that's when I picked it up.
Let me tell you the strange thing about the book, which is I picked it up for $5 at a used store. I forget where it was. Mine's tattered. That's why I got the PDF version. Mm-hmm. But then I've seen it on Amazon for $200. Go figure, Tony, right?
Must be an autographed copy.
One doesn't get those royalties any longer. That's not the point. It was writing something to express our enthusiasm for the field and reaching out to as many people as possible and say, hey, these films need to be seen and they need to be appreciated, as opposed to the disdainful critical comments that were made at the time.
Yep, worked for me.
Right. Oh, good. Yeah. Absolutely. So now we'll talk a little bit about soundtracks and our favorite themes. I thought I'd get that since you are authors and historians of the genre. I'd be remiss. Mike, first off, I know you're a fan. Are you also a collector of soundtracks?
I not so much the vinyl. I never really did get into the vinyl, but I do have quite an extensive collection of CDs.
Oh wow, really? Yeah, I for some odd reason, except I'm going to give away this guilty pleasure. I used to collect first run Beatle LPs that came out. I go to every store when I was 10, 11, 12. I don't know why. I just enjoyed the Mop Tops back when I was a kid. The first real band that I kind of listened to before I got on to more progressive, like Yes, ELP, King Crimson. But I started off on the Beatles, and that's where I first started collecting LPs. And then it just stopped after that. I didn't buy any more LPs for anything ever again. And then I met Tom. Tom gave me a tour of his LP museum, and I can just check out whatever I want. You fill it out like you're at a library. You write your name, put it in the slot, and you can borrow an LP for 2 weeks. But Tom's the big LP collector, right, Tom?
I used to have more than I've got now because I sold some, and when the CDs came out, because I was interested in the music, not really the having it in my hand. I used to have a couple of collectors that would get ticked off because when they would reprise a LP, they would use the same cover as the original, and they thought that was a kick in the pants for them because they had the original. They wanted the covers to change so they looked different. But I was just after the music. I wasn't after the physical LP or CD. But like Mike,
maybe they were looking for Sgt. Pepper's cover, Tom.
Yeah, I've got all the CDs that I can get my hands on.
So, Mike, what are some of your favorite soundtracks that you like from what movies?
You always have to go with Morricone's. You know, the Once Upon a Time in the West, The Fistful, For a Few Dollars More, and then of course the Great Silence. I would say would probably be my list at the top.
Right, and Tony, well, some of your favorite soundtracks?
Well, I would go along with what Michael has said. Morricone is definitely the key. But I'm getting more and more appreciative of the Big Gun Down score because of the work of Sergio Salima. And thanks to YouTube, I've been able to watch his later films like Revolver with Oliver Reed and Fabio Testi, and Devil in the Head with Guy Delaire and Stefano Sandrelli. And those are two very interesting films which carry the themes in his westerns into the modern day, particularly the ending of Devil in the Brain, in which the friend of the so-called villain condemns those of the African family who are still alive. And although they have not done any direct violent deed, they are as guilty as the person who's died. I thought that was a really interesting take. And I think Devil was done by Morricone. I don't know about Revolver. Morricone did that score.
Yeah, he did.
He did good, fantastic films.
Right. And Tom, anything you want to ask these two gentlemen that you didn't
No,
get to
but
ask?
I'm gonna put in my 2 cents. My two favorite LPs or soundtracks of all time would be Once Upon a Time in the West, when Etta sings the scene of the camera going over the station. I still get the hair in the back of my neck stands up
What
50
what
years
hair,
later.
Tom?
Not much, but I mean the couple hairs there.
Hey.
And Cinema Paradiso is the other one. But if you ask me if you're going to go to a desert island and you have to take the collection of one composer for spaghetti westerns, I would go with Demasi. Francesco
interesting.
Demasi. Yep.
That's a good one. You know, my favorite. Oh, I guess I'll tell mine. His name was Tom Betts. Don't know why I can't stop singing that song, but that one and Tom Betts. Those are my two favorite ones.
Another singer.
I don't know why I threw those in there. No, the guy who sounds like Elvis, who does the Django song.
Rocky Roberts.
He's in a few other ones.
Rocky Roberts.
And I just think that's so cool that you're basically ripping off, imitating Elvis
He was my
for
father.
a Django soundtrack. You know, Django. I just love that. But anyway,
the best vocal is Cemetery Without Crosses.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
That is probably the best. Yep.
And a beautiful score.
Yep.
It is a beautiful score. But anyway, gentlemen, that's it for the, I guess, the roundtable part of the show.
I want to ask one more question.
Yes.
Tony.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Your students are way too young, but did they know? Did they know anything about spaghetti westerns?
No, they do not, and they know very little today about classic films we grew up on, like Citizen Kane.
Yep.
When I first came here, how many of you seen Citizen Kane? And 95% of the class would put their hands up. Today, I asked the same question. No, they haven't seen it, so at all.
They even know what it is.
No, and it's a tendency, unfortunately, of dumbing down in universities and high schools, which are absolutely hate. So I have to find myself in a position of explaining what these films were. And whenever I was able to teach film, I've got it back now. Students would come to me after I ran film noir and these classic films by Wells and other people. We never realized films were that good. This is amazing. This is quite a revelation. So basically, I don't think they know anything. And one reason for that is not their own fault, is that they are laboring under very extreme circumstances, huge loans, bad facilities, particularly online. And I don't this semester have damsels in distress. I have students in distress, and I have to try to nurture them to get through to their final exams. So they are more busy now than they used to be in the past when they had plenty of leisure time. So it's a fact of the different changing circumstances facing students today. They're not dumb, they're not stupid, far from it. They're doing these STEM classes to get a job, pay off their loans. But 30 years ago, they would have been in the arts and humanities. But they can't take that risk now. And that's
well, you know what happens? You ask them, what's your favorite film? You get Little Nicky or The Water Boy. So,
Mission Impossible.
Anyway, right. So let's get to our. We got 4 segments that we always have on the show that we end the show with, and so those are long segments. Not just we just go right by them because they're important parts of the spaghetti western genre. And Tony, did you bring anything before we get started?
I bought 3 items for the autograph, the LP, and the book section.
All right.
Nice. Okay. So let's see what we have. I guess we'll start with LP of the week, since I usually don't participate in that. And Mike, what do you got for us?
Well, of course, this one, and it was framed and hanging on my wall, but the classic.
There you go.
Oh yeah,
ugly.
Hanging on the wall.
How often do you listen to it?
I would say I listen to it probably maybe a couple times a week. Not so much the LP. Not the LP, but I'll listen to it on YouTube or when I write, I'll use it a lot of times. So quite a bit.
Stereo speakers?
No. This through the computer.
Okay. Tony, the teacher.
I have a particular. See if I can get. No, I'll sit down and hold.
5-Man Army.
Yeah, 5-Man Army.
It's great
That's
one.
a good one.
Bud Spencer, not to the grave of Mission Impossible, but the interesting thing is the back cover, produced and directed by Italo Zingarelli, not Tom Taylor.
Wow, that's cool.
Oh, Tom, what's your album of the week?
All right, mine's a double, but it's only one side is a Western, and that is Taste of Vengeance, starring Johnny Garco, Jerry Wilson, and Lisa Montez.
They use that same poster, Tom, for Cowards Don't Pay.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Mario Cicilline is the composer. The other side's a war movie. And
which one is it, Tom?
I don't. Seven.
The
Seti,
Wild Geese in Italian?
Seti, Bashi, Rossi, something red.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know who's in it. Then it says again Mario Siciliano by Johnny.
If you say so, Tom.
I know. Got me. I never listened to the war movies.
Right. Okay, then we can, I guess, vault on over to. I guess do I have this set up for a little intro? I do, Tom. You ready, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Book of the week. And I guess I can go first since I didn't have an LP. It'd be nice if I could find it. Okay, it's a book we might have heard about.
The Films of Sergio Leone by Robert Kumbau. Yes, that's one of my early ones. That's Tony. After years, I think I got this one about the same time as I got Frayling's book.
Yeah, I've been in.
It gets right down to it. It's very simple. I enjoy it. It's nicely written. It's an early one that I had.
The only thing I don't like about this one, he got into the symbolism a little bit too much. Crosses.
I didn't see it, Tom. I guess I was too concerned with finding the symbolism. Yeah. Anyway, great book. I'd recommend it.
Oh, yeah.
Highly recommended. Tom, what's your book of the week?
Let's see if Tony should remember this. I don't know if Mike has heard of these. This is by Lucas Balbo. You ever heard of him, Mike?
Yeah, I have.
This is actually a French fanzine.
Wow.
And he used to do them on specific actors and stuff, and it's got all kinds of pictures and it's Jack's filmography and stuff like that.
No, I haven't seen that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like 73, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then Tony, what's your book of the week?
Well, it's one that I reviewed for Film International. It's probably become a collector's item.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Hanley, behind the scenes of Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, Ugly. And it's not just very well documented, but it takes use of new technology because there's a still of Clint reading an article from Time magazine. Yep. And the author basically has been able to scan the exact article that Clint was probably reading at that time in between filming. Right. And I would heartily recommend to anybody if they can get a reasonably priced copy.
It's not available.
Oh,
somebody asked this week on Facebook, and I said, I can't believe that. So I looked everywhere. It's not available.
Gone.
Yep.
Oh, that's okay. I got 3 copies, Tom.
Put it on eBay. Put it on eBay, buddy.
Yeah, right.
Mike, what's your book of the week besides your own?
It's a book by Javier Gomez and Angel Castellino, and it's a book on the Spanish side, mainly Madrid, Spanish westerns.
Film locations.
It mainly talks about the locations, the people, the companies involved, loaded with detail. It's in Spanish, but if you purchase it through Amazon and contact Javier, he will send you a PDF in English. Excellent book. And one more here real quick, I got to say, is my friend Eugenio Ercolini, excuse me. He put out a book called Darkening the Italian Sky, which is fantastic, loaded with interviews of directors, actors of the popular Italian cinema. Very, very. It's on Amazon also. Very highly recommended.
Yep. We've tried to get Javier on here, but he doesn't think his English is good enough. So another time
What's that, Tom?
Well, I've tried to get Javier on here, but he won't come on. He doesn't think his English is good enough. So another interpreter we need.
That's the same excuse we get from everybody. You know, when Nero told me the same thing, oh, Franco, you speak perfect English. You can do
Tony
the show.
said the same thing, and he figured he hadn't been over here long enough that he still had his English accent, that no one would understand what he says. So
I still can't.
Otherwise, you'll have to get Montgomery Ford to dub me for YouTube.
Well, guess what? That's what we're going to do. He's in the next room, by the way. But anyway, let's get to our next segment of the show. We call that Autograph of the Week. And I guess I'll go last since I've got a nice one. Who wants to go first?
I will.
Okay, I'll go.
There we go. Thanks to...
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks to Tom Betts for this autograph of Robert Woods. Can you see that? And
Very
Tom
cool.
Betts. Tom Betts got this for me, which I appreciate.
Nice. Okay, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
What do we got? Oh my! Here we go from the old actor's home again.
Old actor's book. Robert Vaughn.
Right.
Cool.
He was in a modern spaghetti called They Call Me Renegade with Terrence Hill.
Oh my God! You really count that, Tom?
Oh, of course. Of course.
I do not. Just like I don't Little Rita
I know you
or any
don't.
of the Winnetou films.
So I could have put a White Fang up here, but no.
White Fang 1 or 2, Tom?
I just have a paw print from White Fang, Jay.
A paw print.
Paw print.
Very funny. Okay, and Tony, what's your autograph of the week?
Okay, this goes back to the Tim Ferrante program, and he was mercilessly teasing Tom. It was in good humor, but I thought I'd try to right the balance, particularly as Tom sent me early issues of Western All'Italiana. I've got everything up to issue 40, and for some reason it stopped. I'll be able to pick up the other ones anyway. But he'd often write me very nice letters, and of course with his signature down the bottom. And I thought that not only is this necessary to counterpoint Tim Ferrante, but I was thinking last night when I was reading the Lovecraft correspondence to Robert E. Howard, he did one with Clark Aston Smith and C.L. Moore and others, whether somebody should work on the collected letters of Tom Betts to various people and bring them out by an independent publishing company. It's well...
Jay, he must have the only nice letter from Tim Ferrante in existence.
Right. Okay.
At all. I only saw him on that show.
What show was that, Tony?
It was one of your previous podcasts. Which
Western's All Italiana reunion.
Oh, that was a great one. I'm sorry, I must have taken a nap. I don't remember. Anyway, let's get to my autograph. It's one of the loveliest ladies to ever be in a spaghetti western.
Mara Krupp?
I'm actually friends with her. I heard she's not doing well, but I hope she gets better. But back in the day, when I did a lot of the collector shows, she would be there, or I might have drove her to one. Jay Darling. And you know who I'm talking about, Tom?
No, you threw me till then.
It's Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Zsa Zsa?
Queen of Outer Space.
Yeah, she's so...
No, it's Martine Beswick, Tom.
Martine Beswick, yep.
Oh,
Tony, that's the first female I ever saw that was in spaghetti westerns. She was at a collector's show, that Jay and I used to go to, and I bought Drop Dead because I didn't know she was even over here in the States. And I asked her about her acting with Klaus Kinski, and she said, I got along with him great. I felt like saying, well, yeah, because you're a woman.
Right.
Basically.
I always run Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde in my H.G. Scientific romance and Stevenson classes. Love her performance.
Yep.
Hate the way
Dr. Jekyll, Sister Hyde.
Yep.
hate the way she's treated in John the Bastard, but the type of character is aptly named and deserves what he gets.
Yep. Yeah, she's excellent. She's a very nice lady.
Yeah.
John the Bastard.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what we have on tap now, since we did those three things. Oh, okay, Tom. Tom always, before every show, reminds me not to forget this segment because it's one of his favorites, and so we'll do it now, Tom. It's
Vault of the Week.
the WAI Vault.
Tony, you'll appreciate this. This is how we used to do an episode of WAI. We'd collect all this stuff in manila envelopes and
Yes, I remember.
folders. Yep. But this one is ace high.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd cut out whatever we could find. Advertising ad mats. Let's see what I got here. Well, here you go, Jay. French poster.
Mm-hmm.
It looks too nice to be an original, Tom.
It's original. It's that old. How about, okay, this one's not in great shape. There's the Italian.
Nice.
All right. And I think there's one more. Okay, you don't have one of these.
No, I don't have that, Tom.
No, I didn't
I
think
got
you
400 posters. I don't have that.
did. But that's what we had. Then we just collected, like Tony says, we would cut out
Mm-hmm.
reviews in the papers, or someone would send us copies of posters and stuff like that. TV guides, like Mike was saying, we'd cut out this because it used to have cast lists and a little storyline. And then when the
Mike,
internet
cutting and pasting, right? Tom's the originator.
internet
Yeah,
came along, we'd go to
man.
IMDb and stuff, and then we would write out or type out, what the film was about, the cast, and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of work. That's the Vault of the Week.
The Vault of the Week. I love that, Tom. Very good. Okay. Let's see. Where do we go from here? So we do have one last segment, gentlemen, if you stick around. But before we do that, I'd like to always say thank you to the Spaghetti Western groups on Facebook who allow me to promote on their pages. And so, unlike other podcast hosts of similar shows, which there are none, I always like to thank them. And here they are. One and only Tom Betts' Westerns all'Italiana, 800 Spaghetti Westerns in Spain, Once Upon a Time in Italy. Of course, Spaghetti Westerns with John Delaney in the beard. And is that Spaghetti Western movie posters? Of course, Il Meglio del Western all'Italiana. The Blu-ray group, Spaghetti Westerns Unchained, Fanatiques de Western Spaghetti. Of course, Opera Violence. I don't know if you need a residual from that. Our two good friends, Hideki Uno and Hulk Janone. Do you get residuals, Tony?
No, we do not. Those are
How dare a group call that the title of your book?
Do you know how many issues were printed of the book?
No, I don't.
No?
To go back to Jay's territorial imperative comment, that's from Robert Ardrey, but it refers to a tendency in academia to somebody who lays claim to turf. I've done it. How dare you write this book on this piece that I've done? I went to a library in the Barn of Champaign to look at the original manuscript of From Here to Eternity by James Jones, and there was some little enraged gnomish academic barring my way in. What are you doing here? What do you want? Why do you want to look at
Who are you?
That sort of stuff. And I'm dead against it because any field should be open to anybody at all,
Yes.
not reserved of just an elitist person.
Well, I
agree.
disagree. I'm just kidding. Anyway,
Help each other.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
understand. I certainly do.
Mm.
Anyway, Tom, we got another intro for you before we get to something here. And it's our last segment, Tom. And it's called
The Weekly News.
Okay, Tom, what's on the? I know we have a sad obit later in the show.
Yeah, this was a sad week for obits, man. But first of all, we've got I got to plug this. It's a new CD by Sarah Vista. She's got, it's called Sarah Vista Sings Songs from the Silver Screen.
Tom, to show it for more than a second, let's see Sarah and her album cover. Yeehaw.
Okay. Released in England. It was released December 1st. It's got 12 tracks. Among them, she sings Django. So that's why I got to put it in Spaghetti Westerns. Yes, okay.
Nice.
For passings, we've got two bad ones here. Tony, I don't know if you knew this or not. Italian director, assistant director, screenwriter, film editor, and actor Franco Giraldi died. Did you know that?
Yes,
in Trieste of COVID-19 on December 2nd.
Sad.
He was 89. He was born on July 11th, 1931 in Comino. Franco Giraldi began his first steps in the world of cinema, approaching the trend of Italian westerns and comedy of costume. He was assistant director for Sergio Leone on A Fistful of Dollars. Once Leone left the Jolly Film Production Company, it was Giraldi who settled behind the camera, making his successful debut in the Italian Western with the film Seven Guns for the McGregors, 1965, starring Robert Woods. He also directed Hunt Powers and Sugar Cult, 66. Wrote and directed Up the McGregors, starring David Bailey, and directed Alex Cord in A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die. That's not a bad resume for films.
No.
Also, American actress Abby Dalton, bubbly actress who starred in the 1960 TV sitcoms Hennessy and The Joy Bishop Show before portraying the scheming winery heiress Julia Cumsum on the primetime soap Falcon Crest, died November 23rd. She was 88. Born Gladys Marlene Wasden in Las Vegas on August 15, 32, Dalton died in Los Angeles after a long illness. She appeared as Ma Dalton, and Jay's going to get mad, 1997's Buck and the Magic Bracelet, a White Fang movie, Jay.
What?
Yeah. She appeared as Ma Dalton in 1997's Buck and the Magic Bracelet. It's a White Fang movie. Anyways, I didn't know this for the longest time, but when I worked for in the electrical industry, one of our customers, the manager, Jack Smith, was married to Abby Dalton.
Wow.
And I never knew that. I'd gone to a couple of the open houses and interviewed her. Anyways, birthdays this week. Martine Brochard turned 75 on the 30th. She was in A Man Called Blade. Gene Quintano turned 75 on December 1st. He was in Comin' At Ya. Krista Linder turned 78 on December 3rd. She was in Day of Anger. And Loris Lottie turned 65 on December 3rd. He plays the little kid in Hills Run Red. So it makes you feel old. And that's
the weekly news.
Yep.
So, Tom, I'm sure those people are thrilled that you give away their birthday and the day they're born.
I'm sure they are. It's public domain.
And today, so-and-so is 89.
That's right.
So, anyway, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for you guys being here and joining us here on the Hollywood Squares. And, no, it's an honor. You guys have written 2 or total 5 great pieces of spaghetti Western literature that should be on everybody's shelves. And they're both readily available, and some cheaper than others. Although I know Mike appreciates anybody who picks up a book, right, Mike?
Oh yeah, oh yes.
Because we're all a tight knit club.
Having me on.
Oh, we appreciate it.
It's an honor. And Tony, did we keep you from class? Are there some children knocking at the door now?
Oh no, class has disbanded for safety reasons, and Tom could have been reading my obituary today because a week ago we had a COVID scare.
Jeez.
Yeah, a student worker.
Right in that exact room and chair you're sitting on.
No, actually, I spoke to her about 3 months ago. Both of us wore masks. We were social distancing, but she could have passed it on to her office supervisor. So both the supervisor and I got tested, and the results were negative. So
that's good.
The obituary will have to wait, Tom.
Great.
Wow.
I'll postpone it for a while.
But anyway, when we down the road, we'd love to have you gentlemen again for perhaps another roundtable. for this great conversation. I enjoyed every second of it. You learned something. The method behind your technique and writing styles and your backgrounds on why you are who you are today. And we both appreciate you for coming down. Tom?
Yeah, please continue, Mike. Don't give it up. At least if you only do one a year, that's enough. Just keep it going.
Probably what it'll be.
Tony, you got nothing to do during the holidays? Write another book. Write a revision.
Right. Please do.
I want to basically thank you both for the invite. Jay, you did a superb format editing for this program. And
Thank you.
I watch, hope each time live, I feel I'm among friends. So thank you both.
You are. Thanks very much.
You are among friends. There is no two ways about it. Real quick shout out to Seb at the Spaghetti Western database. He's been a big supporter and fan since podcast number 1. Sebastian Hasselback, thank you very much. All your needs after this show, after Mike's books, after Tony's book, I would run to this site, keep it on in a favorites or a bookmark, because that's where you get all your daily information, updated daily, as far as what I hear. Mm-hmm. So anyway, once again, I am Jay Jennings. That's Tom Betts, Mike House, right? And Tony Williams. Wishing you all well, happy, safe holidays. And we'll see you next week for episode 30, which is incredible. Right, Tom?
Right, you got it.
So what do we say to everybody?
Adios, amigos.
Adios, amigos. And adios, compañeros.